Let's bring in Hollywood divorce attorney David Glass for more on this. David?
People going through divorces are going through some of the hardest times of their lives, and a lot of what they're going through is emotional. And in any divorce, there's a huge sense of loss, and loss of relationship, of money, some friends.
We're back for a new episode of The Hourglass, where family law and psychology intersect. If you're going through a divorce, in the middle of one, or trying to move on from one, this show is for you. As a reminder, I'm David Glass, a certified family law specialist, former psychologist, and the author of Moving On, Redesigning Your Emotional, Financial, and Social Life After Divorce. I mentioned in my previous episodes that given that 50% of all marriages end in divorce, it's important to have a go-to source for information. I also mentioned that divorce is unquestionably one of the most difficult of all life's major transitions. But that's why we have this show, so you can get through the transition of your breakup more easily and with less stress. Through our episodes, we continue to cover a wide range of topics and feature a variety of interesting guests and experts who can speak to every aspect of divorce, those who can help our viewers move on productively. Overall, my show is designed to bring insight, clarity, and comfort to those who are about to go through divorce, those who are in the middle of one, or those who are trying to come out the other side. So far, we have covered how to move on emotionally, financially, and socially after a breakup. In our next 4 episodes, we'll cover the holidays, how to get through them as productively and peacefully as possible. With that in mind, let's start with our typical pop quiz. This one will help you assess what your state of mind is as we approach the holiday season. All you have to do is fill in the blanks. Number 1, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much are you looking forward to the holidays this year? Number 2, how long has it been since your breakup? Number 3, if you dread anything about the upcoming holidays, what is it? Number 4, do you have measures in place to keep yourself up and positive during the holidays? List them. And number 5, if you're having a hard time as we near the holiday season, list those in your support system that you can turn to. I want you to know that if you're having a hard time, you're not alone. The holidays are hard for most everyone, for one reason or another. Not just on those who have recently broken up or have come to dread this time of year as a divorcee. It always comes down to expectations and keeping them in check. Our first guest today is Lara Al-Dandachi. Lara is here today to talk with us about the physical aspects of divorce and how much good nutrition plays a part in boosting stamina, keeping your moods level, and setting a healthy eating regime for moving forward post-divorce. She has nearly an entire alphabet of letters behind her name: MPH, RD, CDCES, BC-ADM, and CSOWM. So Lara, tell us what all those initials after your name mean.
Well, thank you for having me, David. The initials are, let's start with the CDCES. It's the Certified Diabetes Care Education Specialist. The BC-ADM is the Board Certified Advanced Diabetes Management. And the last board is the CSOWM, Certified Specialist in Obesity and Weight Management. So I'm board certified in diabetes and obesity management. Yeah.
Right, and in a short phrase, what's your job?
I'm a dietitian that specializes in diabetes, obesity. I hold a Master of Public Health. I teach, I see patients, I do research, and I love what I do. And thank you for having me again. Yeah.
Great, okay, let's jump right into it. What are the foods that we shouldn't be eating during the holiday season, especially when we're under stress or dealing with family?
I would say 2 important things keep in mind and try to avoid as much as possible: sugary food, sugary drinks, and ultra-processed food. So let's talk about sugary drinks and sugary food. So high consumption of sugary food, I'm talking about concentrated juices with 30 grams of sugar, candies, sweets. They can increase your inflammation right away. You know, it's a precursor for the CRP, which is an inflammation marker. It causes your body to produce insulin very quickly, and that triggers inflammation. So I'm not referring to the sugar from fruit. You know, you can have apple, you can have garbanzo beans. We're talking about the concentrated sugar in juices and sodas. So please stay away from sodas and juices as much as possible, and candies. Then the other food group or other kind of food that I would definitely advise to stay away from is ultra-processed food. So we hear the word processed, and processed is not necessarily very bad because a lot of food are minimally processed. If you have the broccoli florets in a bag, it's processed because it was changed from the initial form, but it's not necessarily bad. So it's the ultra processed to stay away from. And that means the food has gone through multiple transformation by adding sugar or fat or oil. So that would be like luncheon meats, canned food, nuggets. So everything that has been processed multiple times. So I would stay away from that as much as possible. And by the way, there was a study published at the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, stating that in the American diet, people consume 58% of their calories from ultra-processed food.
Wow.
Which is huge. That's not processed, that's ultra-processed food. So please minimize the intake of those food and high sugary drinks, yeah.
And what do those sugary drinks and ultra-processed food, in addition to leading to inflammation and other problems, what does it do to our mood?
It affects the mood, absolutely. It causes, and there are studies behind high sugar consumption and increased risk of mood disorder, which includes depression, anxiety, bipolar. The way it works is we know the gut-brain axis. So your mind is related to your gut. So having a healthy gut means having a healthy brain. When you're eating so much sugar, you're not letting your gut have a healthy microorganism. You're killing the good bacteria. You're not letting a diversity of food grow in your gut. So that also reduces the production of serotonin, which is the happy hormone, we call it, as you know. So that besides increasing the risk of inflammation, it does triggers imbalance in brain chemistry because of the poor gut health, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so let's look at it the other way. What kinds of food should we be eating during the holidays to regulate our mood and keep us on as even keel as we're capable of?
A lot of great food. So I would emphasize importance of Mediterranean diet. If you read the US Health News report, they rate diets every year like they rate schools, and the Mediterranean diet for the last 5 years has been ranked the best diet for every aspect: reduce the risk of dementia, for depression, for heart disease, diabetes. But among all of that, I would summarize it: eat fish. Please eat salmon 3 times a week. And why is that? EPA, DHA are healthy fats. They're found in omega-3. They're omega-3 fat, and they're good for your mental health. And there's actually a recent study showing that high consumption of omega-3 reduces the symptoms of bipolar disorder. So there is no consensus on how much, or guideline how much omega-3 we need to take. But every clinician agreed that 500 milligram of combined EPA, DHA is good. So 4 ounces of salmon will provide you with more than 2,000 milligram of EPA DHA. So think about that. 1 piece of salmon will give you what you need for 3-4 days. So if you can eat it 2-3 times a week, that would be great. And then you're adding other sources of omega-3, avocados, nuts, olive oil, flaxseed. So eat a lot of omega-3 food. That would definitely help with the mood and depression, yeah.
And great. And for our viewers, what else is part of the Mediterranean diet?
Yeah, plant-based, a lot of plant-based. So a lot of vegetables, fruits, legumes, which I find here they don't eat as much. That include lentils, chickpeas, garbanzo beans, any kind of beans, any kind of grain. We eat a lot of nuts and seeds, and olive oil is a staple oil we use every day. That's the oil we use. So a lot of healthy fats, a lot of legumes, nuts and seeds. So basically high fiber. And the reason we need high fiber, because this is how we let the healthy microorganism grow in our gut, by eating fiber, which has prebiotic. That's what prebiotic is. So, and studies have shown that taking a supplement of prebiotic is not as efficient as actually eating the food that has prebiotic. So a general rule, I tell my patient, try to consume 20 to 30 different kind of plant-based food a week. So that include the vegetables, the fruits, the nuts, seeds, and legumes. And it's not hard to get it, you know. And one day you can get 5-6 kinds, you know, berries, spinach, almond, walnut. Here you have 4 kinds in one day. So.
Now, you touched on something that I've always wondered about. You know, you're suggesting that it's better to get these vitamins and minerals and omega fatty acids from food. Where do vitamins and supplements come in? And are they even necessary if you're eating the right diet? Yeah,
thank you for asking this question, because I see that a lot in my practice. You only need supplements if you have deficiencies. That's it. But I see people over supplementing and then coming back with a high level of vitamin D, B12, you name it. So get your vitamins and minerals from fruits, 5 to 7 servings a day, from different kind of nutrient from food. When you when you process it, you strip away some of the minerals and vitamins. That's why you want to eat wholesome, whole food. But if somebody can't eat for any different reason, then we recommend the supplement. So I would only recommend it if there's deficiency. If somebody, if you can't eat that many vegetables or fruits, then taking a multivitamin once a day would be good. If you can eat fish, olive oil, take the omega-3, but it won't be the same like eating the food. And there are certain other supplements, let's say, I would say magnesium at night to help with sleep. So certain minerals, but definitely we need to deviate from that excessive, supplement we advocate here. And the problem, it's a multi-billion marketing industry. Everybody call themselves nutritionists and they sell these products, but you really don't need them if you don't have deficiency. Because too many supplements can affect the kidney function as well. Yeah.
Sure.
So that can jeopardize your renal function down the road. Yeah.
And so listening to the Mediterranean diet and focusing on salmon, how does the traditional American Thanksgiving meal, how does it fit into this whole picture?
I say enjoy it. That's what I would say. It's one day a year, just enjoy it. Be mindful, of what you're eating. Of course, if you can have dishes that have more vegetables, but do your turkey, cook it, eat it, enjoy it. It's once a year. Incorporate vegetable, like I said. And another thing I tell my patient, try to follow the rule of 80-20. If you're doing everything right 80% of the time, you leave room for that 20%, which is the special occasions, Thanksgiving and birthdays and trips. So just be mindful and enjoy and add more vegetable dishes. Yeah.
Sure.
Maybe use sweet potato rather than mashed potato. Don't add a lot of sugar. Just general tips on minimizing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now the penultimate question is, where does chocolate fall in all this? Some people say it's a mood elevator. Some people say they go to it when they're sad. Where does chocolate fall in the whole spectrum of things we should be eating?
It is great for you if it's dark chocolate. So I would recommend 70% dark chocolate and higher. It's high in flavonoid, which is a great antioxidant. It helps with the blood flow into the brain, which is good also with mood disorder. So I would definitely recommend taking dark chocolate only. Avoid the milk or minimize the intake because milk chocolate has sugar, right? And in the dark chocolate, you get the whole cocoa if it's 70% or more. But do 1 to 2 squares at a time. That's it, not the whole bar.
Right.
Just to minimize the amount. But it's high in magnesium and selenium. It's great for you. If you want to have 1 square each night of 70% dark chocolate, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. As long as the portion is under control. Yeah.
So Lara, you mentioned the connection between the gut and the brain. Can you tell us more about the foods you eat and how they affect your hormonal levels?
Yes, so 90% of the serotonin, the happy hormone, is produced in the gut. So in order to have a healthy level of serotonin, a healthy mind, we need to have a healthy gut. So that's only by having a diversity of food. So definitely eating fiber, eating fermented food, fish, nuts, seeds, all of that will contribute to a healthy gut, which is an indication that you have enough or a good level of serotonin. So your gut is related to your mind. So that's the gut health, the gut-mind axis. And the field of nutrition psychiatry is still very new, but we know that having a healthy gut means having healthy mental health. Yeah.
Okay, and is the holiday season a hot season for people to come in and see their nutritionist?
To be honest, most of them don't show up during that time. They come in January, they miss their appointment during that time, and studies have shown that most people gain between 7 to 9 pounds from Halloween into Christmas, New Year. So they don't show up a lot of time. But the patients who do, we always emphasize the importance of maintaining your weight, stay active. And another important thing that really helps, no matter what you're doing with nutrition, you may be taking all the great supplements, eating well, sleep. Because I can't tell you how many patients I see in our clinic struggling with sugar and depression and high sugar levels because of lack of sleep. So what I would say for the holiday, sleep, stay active, be conscious and mindful of your portion so you don't gain weight at least. You don't lose, but at least don't gain. And always be mindful of your food choices, sit, take your time, at least half an hour, savor the taste of the food and enjoy, the connection with people. And if you take your time in eating on those dinner celebrations, you won't end up eating that much versus eating quickly. So enjoy that, the celebration, the connections, and be more mindful and sleep well and move. Yeah.
So how much time should we take at a meal? Because it seems to me, I've got 2 young children. We rush in, the kids eat in about 3 minutes. We're trying to keep them at the table, but how long should the optimal meal be for your digestion?
It is hard, ideally 60 minutes, which is hard to achieve. So I would say at least 20 to 30 minutes. 20 minutes to 30 minutes, just to get the message to the brain that you're full and you're not still hungry. So at least that. And I know it's difficult. So if you can do 5 meals a day where you're spending an hour and the rest you minimize, that's good. Always remember the 80-20 rule. So as much as possible, and remove distraction. That's the key. The mobile phone or the TV or any sorts of distraction. That's very important.
Right.
A lot of time my patients forget what they eat. I'm like, what were you doing when you ate? Watching TV, talking on the phone. So you become unaware of how much you're eating or what you're eating. So 20, 30 minutes with kids, I would say, is a good time. Yeah.
And what about eating standing up? That's, you're at the sink, you're trying to get a meal in. I'm assuming that's not a good practice.
Absolutely. And you're distracted. That's why you're standing up, because you're doing something. That's, again, the distraction. So you want to sit and enjoy the meal and use your sensation, you look at the meal, how it's presented, how it tastes, the colors. So you can't do all that when you're standing up. Yeah.
Right.
But with our busy lifestyle, it's difficult. So just do it as much as you can. Sit and eat mindfully as much as you can, yeah. And minimize the amount of calories. So when you know you're going to be distracted and you have a meeting and you have other obligations, just at least have low-calorie food or not that heavy meal, so you're not ending up consuming a very high amount of calorie where you're distracted.
Right.
You're not present in enjoying the meal, yeah.
Now, Lara, you've given us the optimal diet. And how we should be eating. What about people who have a sensitive digestive system or they're suffering from IBS? Mm-hmm. How can they partake in this great diet you've described?
Yeah, so it's very individualized. So depending on the reason and the cause, sometimes it needs antibiotic if the patient have a certain bacteria like SIBO. Sometimes it's related to stress. But as I mentioned in the beginning of this session, more than 50% of what we eat in this country is ultra-processed food. So one of the reasons people have that sensitive gut is because they don't have a diverse ecosystem. They don't have a diverse bacteria and virus in their gut. And that only happens by consuming a variety of food. So I would say we can start slowly. There's a FODMAP diet, but it depends again on the degree of severity. Mm-hmm. So you need to eat those foods. And if you can't tolerate them, like the green leafy vegetables or the legumes, we start slowly. Maybe half a cup every other day. But that's exactly the reason why people have sensitive gut, because they don't have a healthy gut. So you want to introduce prebiotic, postbiotic as tolerated, and that's where it's good to work with a dietitian that specializes in that can help you go through this and see what you can tolerate and you can. But I can tell you again, based on studies and research, Mediterranean diet is the right diet. So if you can't tolerate certain food, work by slowly introducing some of this food, and that should help improve your gut health. Yeah.
Great. Completely different than I thought the answer would be. It seems to me that you avoid things that irritate you, and you're suggesting instead...
You avoid to a certain extent. That's why you want to eat slowly, but you can follow the FODMAP diet. There's an app actually called Monash Library that you can put your symptoms and MONASH, and then it tells you, for example, you can have 5 almonds, 2 tablespoons, let's say, of hummus. Then you met your limit. So it helps you follow the FODMAP diet, but with not a lot of restriction. And again, it's very individualized. Some people can't at all. They have to be really slowly. Others, we can really just introduce. So that's why it's good to work with a specialist, yeah.
You've given us an enormous amount of information. Yeah. Where can people find you?
I work at UCLA, Department of Medicine. So I see patients in 3 clinics. You just type in my name and you can find my UCLA profile. Yeah,
Great.
I'd be happy to see anybody, yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Of course, my pleasure.
Next, to find ways to constructively plan for the holidays, especially getting your head in the right place when it comes to sharing the kids, I've invited 2 of my colleagues from EPG Lawyers, Erin Gray and Nikki Hart-Caledeira, to join us. Both are highly respected family law experts who are here to talk about handling the children over the holidays. Without naming names, they're going to share some holiday stories where their clients were warring over their children during the holidays, having trouble with the client's in-laws, or downright dealing with an impossible ex. What we know is a part of the holiday preparation for divorced parents is to consider how you're going to go about the discussion and arrangements for sharing the time with the kids with your ex. The ill feelings most divorcees experience when getting ready for the inevitable handoff need to be pre-planned, because in the end, it's the kids that usually suffer more than their parents when things are rocky between them, when they spar over the schedules. Ladies, welcome. I want to get started with Nikki because you offered to tell us about your own personal experiences. Mm-hmm. So tell our viewers about your background.
Well, I've been a lawyer for 20 years, but straight out of law school, I started working in sports. So I worked in sports for about actually most of the 20 years. And at some point I felt like I needed to make a bigger impact, like directly on people's lives. And if I looked back at the 20 years I spent in sports, there were many people that came into my office asking me for advice when they got divorced. Even though they knew I worked on sponsorship agreements, marketing agreements, trademarks, what they came to me for was advice on a personal and professional level when they were going through divorce. And then I went through my own divorce, my first divorce about 10 years ago. And I realized the importance of being able to guide someone through that and the positive impact it could have, particularly on children.
Right.
So after thinking about it for a number of years, I came to you, David, we chatted, and it just seemed like, a great fit to try. So I started doing family law, and I'm super happy to have that ability to directly impact people's lives. And a lot of my advice to clients that I feel has been good has grown from the advice I gave myself when I went through it, advice I learned from my friends when I went through it, and things that I misstepped with myself and lessons I learned the hard way.
Sure.
And it really does shape the advice I give to my clients now.
So give us an example of one of the things you did wrong when you were first divorced, and maybe even something around the holidays.
Yeah. Well, I had it kind of flipped. I did things right when I first got divorced.
Right.
But I made the mistake of thinking if you start on the right foot initially, it stays that way forever. And it doesn't, because life is not stagnant. Everything changes. So when it comes to the holidays, particularly, my ex-husband and I, we first made an agreement. We set a schedule for the year. The schedule never changed. It didn't change at Christmas. It didn't change at Thanksgiving. It didn't change at summer. We each had rights to go on vacations. But the schedule was the schedule. So if Christmas, which is the holiday that we celebrated, if it fell on a Tuesday, that was my day. If it fell on a Saturday of his weekend, it was his day. And we really never, ever, with rare exception from me needing to travel for work, changed the schedule. And this helped at the holidays really keep everything quite peaceful for my kids. And one thing I often say to clients and people that I'm working with, my friends, is we all have a certain amount of energy to use each day.
Yeah.
And if we take up that energy with change and special occasions and like newness of a day, in addition to the stress of holidays where you have other like extended family members impacting your energy, then you're dwindling down the energy you can use to actually enjoy the day.
Right.
And if this is true for us at age 49 in a grown body with experience, imagine a 5-year-old who doesn't have the experience trapping all that confusion in their body. So it's going to impact their ability to enjoy the day. So when we were first separated and divorced, the schedule was the schedule. Holidays were really quite easy. And my kids enjoyed it immensely, whether we celebrated on Christmas Day or the day after. It really didn't matter to them. Mm-hmm. When it got complicated and when I really did misstep was when I got remarried and I was trying to blend my family with my husband's family. So it's intercontinental, intercultural, interracial, interlingual. So we had a lot of factors that impacted the ability to blend. And between us, we have 3 other co-parents. So I have one in my ex, and he has 2 mothers of his children. My ex was very uncomfortable, even though I had the legal right and the contractual right to travel with the kids at the holidays on the days that were my days. My ex was very uncomfortable with that because he felt threatened with a new family structure and a blending of a family. And for various other reasons. And I was determined to blend this family as you should by the books. I wanted to have the nice Christmas all together, the experience with all 5 of our kids together under one house in a new house, have them become friends. And I really wanted to force the issue of my kids traveling at Christmas down to Brazil. Because I thought it would set us up for success long run. And I was super forcing it. My ex was not comfortable with it. My kids were put in the middle of that, and they felt the tension of it. And actually, my husband said, Nick, there's nothing good is going to come out of this. If their dad's not comfortable, they're not going to be comfortable with me and my family if their dad's not comfortable. So we're trying too hard here. We just have to relax. And once I did relax, we didn't have the Christmases that I thought the first couple years, but then it set us up for longer success later on when everyone could be more comfortable. But I remember the first Christmas of me wanting so badly to have it my way and exercise my legal rights. And you could feel the kids just, tightening up with the tension of it. And that was really one of my biggest missteps at the holidays.
Right.
So,
Erin, tell us about your background. How did you come to become a family law attorney?
I have been practicing family law for over 25 years, and it was really by accident in law school. I started working for a family law judge, and I loved it. And I felt that it was an area where you can help people. I'm still that idealistic person that, I went to law school to help people. And I still feel that after all these years. And so I just jumped right into it. And also during law school and afterwards, I volunteer for an organization, the Harriet Buhey Center for Family Law, where we represent low-income victims of domestic violence. And so that's, I'm really passionate about that. It just makes you put things in perspective and really help people who need it. Not that my clients don't need it, but it's a different perspective.
Yeah.
And it helps me balance the, high stress of someone being upset that maybe someone was 3 minutes late versus someone who doesn't have the help they need because they're not a legal resident to help their children to protect them from serious violence.
Right. It's funny you say you fell into it by accident. You guys know I started out as a psychologist and fell into family law by accident. You started out.
I got my master's in social work working with teenage foster kids and then went away from it and came back to it,
Yeah. So you never know where you're going to end up.
Exactly.
But Erin, tell us, do you have any stories about clients during the holidays, either missteps or the things that they did right?
I do. Of course I do. So I think that, I recently had a case where the mom kidnapped the children over the kids' birthdays, over Halloween, over Thanksgiving. And aside from the stress of, I don't know where my children are, it was very upsetting for my client. He has young kids and, he was able to say, I had explained to him, we're going to get the kids back. We're going to locate them. That's the most important thing. You're going to have more Thanksgivings. There's going to be more birthdays. And you have to you can't control that. And there's it's obviously a very high conflict case. And so I think that helped him. He's like, you're right. And it's only one, and his 1-year-old's not going to remember it. And when we did locate the children, the child abduction unit who was helping us, and a wonderful sergeant from that unit was determined to get the children back to him before Christmas.
Right.
And by the grace of God, we did, literally a day before. And I just think it's important, even if it's, what I always tell my clients is, the holiday's about the children. It's not about you. You can't say, I want to celebrate Christmas with my kid. Because it's supposed to be about the children. It's supposed to be special. And when the kids feel like they're in the middle or, you have to go to your dad's tonight for, Christmas Eve, or vice versa, it takes the joy out of it for the children. And I have a lot of my clients who 1 year they have Christmas Eve, next year Christmas, or they have Christmas and Christmas Eve together, New Year's and New Year's Eve together. And and sometimes you'll just make Christmas dad's holiday, New Year's Eve mom's holiday. And that way, those are the special holidays with the children. And that way you allow the children to have something special with each parent.
Right.
And at least one thing that they're not torn. The kids didn't ask for this.
Right.
And whatever your feelings are, you have to let that go and be supportive of your children because they feel it. Oh my gosh, and if it's a different religion, if you celebrate Christmas and your spouse celebrates Hanukkah, you should be supportive of still lighting the candles on Friday night with your children, even if it's not your religion. You have to let the children know that, you are accepting of the parent, because inherently children are half mom, half dad. And one thing I don't think parents realize is when you say something negative about the other parent, internally that child feels that way, and that's not fair. You wouldn't do that to someone else's kid, and you wouldn't do that to your best friend. And I think parents need to remember, this isn't about you. This is always about the children, and you have to learn to just put the rest of it aside.
Right. I remember when I got divorced, my girls were 8 and 10. And like you, we started with a calendar, and we were just going to stick with the calendar. And that worked great for about 2 years, because there were no arguments and there was no negotiating.
Right.
But as I started to myself loosen up, I just realized my girls like spending the New Year's holiday with their mom. They always went away to Mexico. And they really enjoyed spending Thanksgiving with me and my new family, because we did a big deal about it. And we just started modifying the schedule just on a week-to-week or day-to-day basis. It all works out in the end.
I like that too. And I think recognizing that there's some holidays where one parent celebrates it more than the other, or it's more meaningful, and acknowledging that along the way really does have a positive impact, and it makes it so much more cohesive for the children. And also, things change over time. Like the first Christmas after your divorce is not going to be like the second Christmas, not going to be like the third Christmas. So things will loosen and relax as time goes by if you let them.
And I think you also want to teach your children how to be flexible, not how to be a pushover, but and not how to be a bully. But life happens, and you go with the flow. And also you have to hear, and same for the parents. If a child is sick, on a holiday and wants to stay with dad or wants to stay with mom, it's important for the parents, I think, to hear that too. I'm not saying when one parent is manipulating the situation, but children need to have a voice as well. And the children will love you that much more. Not that it's a competition, but the more loving and supportive you are, you're giving your children the tools they need to have a successful life in business, school, relationships, siblings.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Erin, you've mentioned before like a holding sand in your hand example on how to deal with your kids post-divorce. Why don't you share that with our viewers?
So I think a lot of times when parents go through a divorce, one parent has been more involved than the other. And so the more involved parent says, oh my gosh, I can't believe that mom or dad now is super parent. And it tends to give them an insecurity, and their sense of self-worth as a parent is threatened. And so one of the analogies that I think has been successful in helping my clients understand is, if you have sand in your hand, and you hold it just like this loosely, sand stays there. If you grasp it, the sand spills out of your fingers. And children and humans and spouses are like that. And so the more just, do what you need, they're going to stay there and grow. And I think that when you're going through a divorce, it's stressful, or custody, and you want to be able to control something because the process is outside your control. And I just think the more you can just remember, your kids aren't going anywhere unless you do this, because no one wants to feel like they're a pawn in their parents' divorce. Don't make them an unnecessary participant in the divorce. And the only way you can do that is to let the sand gently rest in your hand.
Has everyone been listening out there? We need you to listen to these two attorneys in particular, but you just have to back off a little bit. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Our pleasure, David.
Thank you, David. It was a pleasure.
Next up, we have someone who is recently separated from her spouse. Anabelle Munro, an actress, producer, and director. She also heads her purpose-driven independent film festival, ETHOS. Now, Anabelle, I know you were married for 18 years and have 2 children, 8 and 6 years old. We never ask our guests to share anything that they don't feel comfortable sharing. But what can you tell us about your current situation?
Well, it's very recent and things are not worked out yet. So it didn't come as a big surprise because there were a lot of contributing factors and a lot of love also there, which makes you endure some situations way longer than you probably should.
Sure.
And also negative influences that have accumulated, you know, once you start setting boundaries. I think the you know, those counteracting forces, you know, become bigger and there's more conflict. But because they are children, it's just not an environment that can go on. So I was actually pushing for a separation, for a physical separation, to let certain things work out.
Sure.
But it all went a slightly different way, which is unfortunate. But then again, I'd say it's my partner's loss because I've been a very committed wife and really did my best. And I was able to develop unconditional love for somebody who's not my flesh and blood in that sense. And that is something I'm pretty proud of.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, over a long period of time.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Now, our episode today deals with how people prepare to enter the holiday season when they're newly divorced. And so what do you have on your checklist? What are you doing to prepare for this holiday season?
Well, first up, I don't even know if my family, my children, are going to be in Los Angeles with me. Because I'm experiencing a lot of surprises, you know, where I'm being confronted with, for example, I'm sure he wants to visit his family in South Africa. And now that we are freshly separated, that the situation has changed a little bit where I'm not feeling so confident about this being a good idea right now. And so I don't know where the children are going to be. We have not yet finalized the negotiation. In an ideal scenario, they would be at home and I'm sure we would have a beautiful holiday. All the children's birthday are around Christmas as well. My daughter's birthday is before, my son's birthday is just after. And it would be, I think, a great time for us to unwind and celebrate. If they are not at home, which I find out, and let's see how the negotiations go. I'll definitely make it a good time for myself because I like spending time with myself and keeping myself busy with things I usually cannot do with the children at home. So I'm going to do something nice and festive. And I'm a Christian, so in that sense, that holiday has a special meaning for me anyways.
What are some of the things that you did with your family all together when the holidays came around?
So I'm super duper traditional, you know, so it's like baking cookies, Christmas tree, you know, doing little outings, going to Christmas markets, then also preparing, you know, getting presents. It's very sweet to do that with the children and to give them ideas and to make some stuff and decorations. I'm all about crafty stuff as well. Yeah, that's what we usually do. And actually in recent years, those activities have always been disrupted by the, you know, tricky situations in the relationship. So I would envision this to go much smoother from here on forward.
Sure. And so is it your plan for yourself or for your kids to try and keep things as similar as they were during the marriage, during the holidays?
In our specific situation, I consider myself as the stable parent. And so the idea is that I remain in our home and that the children remain with me. And there's unfortunately some concerns about a 50-50 custody situation, but we have to see where this is all going to go. So in an ideal world, they don't continue the way they were because now my husband is not living at home anymore, or my soon-to-be ex-husband. So the difference would be that we have a quiet, calm, peaceful, stable home environment and a lot of goodwill between the parents. And I definitely understand the necessity for a father to be available to the children and vice versa. So I would never want to be in the way of that. But I also know that the stresses of parenthood and, you know, all the nasty things like getting them ready for school and getting them to bed and like disciplining have been a major topic of fighting between us. So I don't think that, it's a perfect environment to spend more than a couple of like happy days, you know what I'm saying? And not get in the rut of stress, because I think I'm more cut out for that.
Sure. A big part of any former couple's decision making, if they're going to try and make decisions for themselves in a divorce, is what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and how can we schedule this so we can both work off our strengths.
Right.
And it seems like you're taking a very flexible or resilient approach to all this. Is that something you do ordinarily in your life, or is this something new that you're finding now that you're separated?
Well, thank the heavens, I'm a performer, I'm a director, I'm a writer, and I'm also a producer. That means my whole life is geared around finding solutions and dealing with very tricky personalities. Sure. And finding ways to make it happen. So in this situation, I must say all my skills come. I'm surprised that I'm not devastated and destroyed. And maybe that's a little early to say that, you know, maybe in a month I'm like, but I don't think so, because if you do your best and if you walk the path of kindness and goodwill, even if you have to say no and engage in a sort of a fight, you know, you can still rely on yourself. And that helps me definitely a lot. And I'm also, my faith is very strong. So that's why I'm saying I have no problem spending time with myself, because I'm never alone in that sense. Sure. And I have also a good, you know, set of rules to fall back on if I'm getting confused or frustrated.
I'm sure there are tons of people out there who are in similar situation to you. Do you have any advice to our viewers who are just freshly getting into this separation leading towards divorce? What are your words of advice for them?
I think acceptance is very important, and forgiveness is absolutely crucial. And I've noticed with friends that I have that are still struggling with their ex-partners after decades, and they are so angry and like, you know, call them names. Oh, that wants this and this, and there's just fighting. I think that is something every person has the power to use discernment of how they want to be. And if you take the time to go within and find, you know, that place of being the bigger person, and I know that sounds really lame, but in the end of the day, it is really the one thing where you can navigate through this, you know, while the boat is rocking, you can lie in there and you know you're gonna make it through.
Sure.
So be kind, set boundaries, and stand up for things that are not, but you don't have to turn into a vicious, angry person. And I mean, I get angry too, but I can transform it into maturity. And I mean, the kids are a beautiful reason to keep that in mind as well, because if you start fighting long term, what kind of, you know, picture of a father are you setting up for the children or for future relationships? You actually can give the kids the tools to deal with things that happen to them, and they don't have a choice really besides their own attitude. Absolutely.
Very wise words, very helpful advice. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Sure.
Moving on in our discussions about preparing both mentally and physically for the holidays, I want to talk now about one of the touchiest subjects of all: how to help the children of a divorce with their mental state and physical well-being during the holidays. What you may already know and share in is that the kids are often caught in the middle of divorced parents. Maybe the couple is fighting over where the children will spend the holidays and with whom, especially when those arrangements are likely to fluctuate every holiday season. Then again, maybe one parent is trying to out-gift the other, and the kids feel guilty towards the less gift-giving parent. Maybe this season's events make them feel badly that their friends' parents are together, but theirs are not. There are so many issues to discuss when it comes to kids and the holidays. Fortunately, we have with us today Dr. Daniel Franklin. Dr. Franklin is the founder, president, and clinical director at the Franklin Educational Service, with offices in both Los Angeles and Orange County. He's also the author of Helping Your Child with Language-Based Learning Disabilities, available on Amazon. Dr. Franklin, tell us about yourself and your work.
Sure. I run a educational services company, Franklin Educational Services, and we provide a very broad range of education support and, frankly, social emotional support services to children, teens, and young adults, and increasingly adults. We provide things like specialized academic tutoring, educational therapy. We offer fully accredited one-on-one schooling. I offer school companions. They used to be called shadows. We prefer companions, not just for school-age students, but college students too. There are a lot of college students who arrive on a campus and they just need an extra level of support. So these are the things we do, frankly, throughout California, largely here in Los Angeles and in Orange County.
Great. And what about your background? What brought you to running Franklin Educational Services?
Well, I started my career as a classroom teacher, became really excited about the area of reading, language, and learning disabilities. I received my master's degree in reading, language, and learning disabilities at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I also taught in the Harvard Reading Lab. I immediately became drawn to the field of psychological studies in education. That's how I ended up out here in Los Angeles at UCLA, where I earned my PhD in psychological studies in education.
What advice can you offer to kids who are dealing with newly divorced parents and they're going back and forth between two different homes?
I don't know if it's advice, but we need to affirm that it's hard, it's painful, and a lot of children feel that they shouldn't feel pain and shouldn't feel anguish because they may come from privileged homes or they may have some other advantages relative to other children. The reality is that trauma of divorce is one of the most significant, painful traumas a child, teen, or young adult can experience.
I've heard the term helicopter parent tossed around a lot. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the difference between a helicopter parent and a helpful parent is this. Helicopter parents provide help that is not needed. Helpful parents provide help that is needed. And children who come from homes where there is divorce, they need a lot more help because they are overwhelmed by the emotional impact of the divorce. It diminishes their capacity for attention, for emotional regulation, for all the executive skills needed for success in school and life, planning, organization, and time management. Children who are from homes where there's been a divorce, they need a lot more help than other kids, and parents should not feel self-conscious about providing it.
Right, so it's not a leave the kid alone, let him or her pull herself up by the bootstraps approach.
No, the sink or swim approach doesn't work. And something else I want to address too is grit. Why? Because there's a mistaken notion that grit is a God-given internal resource a child has in them, and all they have to do is sprinkle some water on it and it grows. That's not where grit comes from. Grit is really resilience. Resilience is known to come from, and this has been studied, from healthy quality relationships with adults. And so if we want to promote resilience, I prefer resilience to grit. If we want to promote resilience, we need to look for ways for children to have healthy, positive relationships with healthy, positive adults.
How can children handle their own feelings during particularly troubling times like the holidays, where they may have to go back and forth between their parents' homes?
These feelings are complex. They're also very deep-seated, literally, in the brain. We call these the subcortical regions, way below the conscious realms of the brain. When we have feelings that are difficult to access, it's difficult to engage in a conscious verbal process. Yeah. So really, when we're talking about, and again, I need to go back to trauma here, because these are traumatic experiences. We want to use a lot of nonverbal communication. We want to engage in fun things, playing games, doing activities together that don't involve a lot of speaking, taking walks, playing sports, cooking together, dancing, making music, creating art. Engaging in lots of nonverbal activities is a great way for a child to feel calm and connected to the adult they're with. If we get too involved in lots of talk-type activities, it can be really overwhelming.
Right.
A good gauge often is, it's not always, but often, to never use more words in a given minute than a child is producing.
Right.
And parents, us adults, have the gift of gab, right? So we're blabbing away all the time. But we need to really observe children and see how many words they're producing in a given minute. And we never want to exceed that. Language production is a good measure of language processing. So if a child is producing very few words, it means they're probably having a difficult processing words that are coming in. So we really want to limit the number of words we use when we're with children who are navigating trauma, like divorce.
Right. Very interesting. I mean, I have two sets of kids. I have two older daughters from a prior relationship and two young sons right now. And so I have a 5.5-year-old. And when he comes home from school, I always want to find out what's going on in school. What was the interesting thing that happened at school? Was anything surprising at school? And I never get anything out of him. And maybe it's because I'm going at him with too many words.
That may be the case. I know you pretty well, David. I'm sure you're a stellar dad. The first thing I ask kids when I see them is, how is school?
Right.
And I've been in education for over 30 years. So it's natural that we do that, and kids are used to it.
Right.
The reality is a dad relationship means the world, and kids will be patient with parents who overwhelm them with questions that they might not want to answer.
Great. Maybe I should engage in some more activities and let him come to it on his own, perhaps.
Yeah, kick a ball around or start cooking something, do some drawing. One little tip about doing art with children, that when we do art, I teach art to children. When we do art with children, we need to be careful not to produce too much art ourselves. A child will immediately look at what the adult's producing and measure their own progress relative to the adult. And that will inhibit art production. So when we do art with children, I really encourage the adults to sort of step back and be there simply to facilitate the activity, not engage in it.
Can children have safe spaces that are separate and apart from either of their parents? And what kind of work can you do with children to help develop those safe spaces?
So an often overlooked safe space is silence, just silent companionship. A safe space might be sitting on a couch for an hour, not saying any words. So there's lots of ways. Taking a walk and not talking can be a safe space. So kids invariably do want some social connection, or at least the access to it. So I'm not sure that things like timeouts and making kids be alone or by themselves is necessarily the best strategy. So we want to think more creatively about safe spaces. And again, it can be just sitting quietly somewhere, or taking a drive and not talking about anything, or taking a walk, or going to a museum, or going to a store and just looking at the latest sneakers that have come out, or anything else.
And what about with teenagers in particular? I remember when my daughters became teens, they would run in the front door, run up the stairs to their room, shut the room door, then they'd come running down the stairs when their friend got there. Any tips for dealing with teens during the holidays?
Teens are the best. They are so interesting to me, and they are so complex. And the one thing about teens is they need other teens. And I think it's important that we get comfortable with the fact that when teens are teens, they'd rather be with teens than anybody else. Obviously, we want to be thoughtful about whether or not some of those relationships are healthy and positive, and there's a legitimate concern there. But I think we have to appreciate that teens need to be with teens, and it's actually probably a pretty healthy, positive thing.
Right, so kids in their teenage years start moving away from their parents and their family as their primary social activity, and they start going out into the world and making friendships and valuing those friendships.
Terrific book by Poe Bronson called Nurture Shock, and he has a co-author, and please forgive me for not remembering, I believe, her name. I should know it, but I don't at the moment. But it's Nurture Shock. And there's some wonderful chapters in there about teen communication patterns that only other teens really understand. And so we need to let teens go ahead and engage in teen social communication patterns and social activities.
It sounds like parenting is a constantly changing give and take, points where you need to come in and help.
Yes.
And other times when you need to sit back and let things play out.
Sure. And above all, we need to remember that teens are genetically predisposed to seek distance from their parents. The reason being, if we did not as a species come up with a strategy for seeking independence right when we became sexually mature, we wouldn't have the capacity to navigate the world successfully without parent support. And remember, most parents were dead by about age 20 or 25 throughout most of human evolution.
Right.
So if a teen wasn't pretty successful by age 12 or 13 at navigating the world on their own, that individual is not going to reproduce very much because they're not going to be alive long.
Yeah.
So we have this amazing biologically predisposed characteristic built into teens that says, hey, I need a high degree of independence or my genetic line is done. Problem is, in this day and age, a lot of 20-year-olds, I would even say most 20-year-olds, are not biologically prepared, and certainly not prepared in many other ways, to navigate this rather complex world we've created for them.
Yeah.
So we have 20, 25-year-olds even who really need the support parents offer, yet the internal mechanism is saying, hey, no, I don't want anymore, I don't need anymore.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When I took my first child, who's now out and working, but when I took her to school, I took her there with my wife, her stepmom, and we dropped her, we got a room set up at college, had some breakfast the next morning, and then we were heading to the airport. And she said, all right, bye, see you guys. And then she ran off back to the campus. And I got in the taxi and was crying that she doesn't need us anymore. What's going on here? And my wife, as she often does, gave me the perspective, this is what you want. You want your child to run off to college, not to be hanging on to you.
You do want that. Increasingly, a lot of kids, for a lot of different reasons, are showing them at college and they're not actually ready for that level of separation and that level of independence. And we really don't want to pathologize the young adult for having needs. And it's really important when we're sending a kid off to college that we be thoughtful about what they might need in terms of some mentorship, companionship, guidance, oversight, life skill support, even academic and study skill support. There's a lot of really bright, hardworking, well-meaning kids who go off to college and drop out within literally the first few weeks or first few months, and it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
If we plan ahead and we put in place some support mechanisms that are needed, these kids can thrive. You were lucky. Your daughter was ready to do it on her own. There are a lot of equally bright, motivated, well-meaning kids who aren't. And we need to be aware of that and not pathologize the child or their parents for that scenario.
So Daniel, any other tips for us if we have a child who's having trouble navigating the holidays and going between their parents' homes?
Well, among other things, we have to remember that the past 2.5 years with the COVID issue has greatly exacerbated all the problems that were minor or maybe serious are now serious or very serious. So we need to be even more patient, not only with kids, but with ourselves too. And I think that having some discussion about these are especially challenging times. They're more challenging now than ever. And that we need to let all young people know that we have more patience and more tolerance than ever before, because it's a harder time now than ever before. And this is especially true for young people whose parents are divorced or in the divorce process. That we need them to know that it's okay to have needs. It's okay that things aren't working really well, but we are always going to be by their side, stand with them, and we're always going to be available to help in whatever way we can.
A lot of very interesting information, very useful information. Where can our viewers find you?
Well, I can be reached several different ways. At franklined.com, that's the website for my company. I can also be reached at danielfranklinphd.com. It's all one, danielfranklinphd.com. I'm very easy to reach. I always get back to people. I love hearing from parents, educators, clinicians, students. I welcome any communication anyone would like to share with me, and I will get back to them.
Great. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
My pleasure. It's been great being here.
Our guests have certainly given us an inside look from their respective points of view on how to prepare for the holidays this year. Yes, some great solid suggestions, but see what you can create on your own to prepare comfortably for the holidays. Get creative. Here is something else I want to remind you of. If you're struggling with your feelings and getting more and more down as the holidays loom closer, know this. Number 1, this too shall pass. Number 2, you are not alone. Number 3, think about the spirit of the holidays. Spread good cheer. Number 4, think peace and goodwill toward your fellow man. And yes, that includes your ex. Number 5, if you get sidetracked and start to slide into depression, count your blessings. Focus on what you're grateful for. In fact, you know I'm big on lists, so make one and write them down. If you get bogged down in what was, what could have been, and what you don't have this year, think 2 positives for every negative. That's a great remedy. Write down your expectations for this year and keep them realistic. As a reminder, time flies. How much of it are you willing to squander on negative emotions as you go about planning for what can be one of the most festive times of the year? Let's close out the guest portion of the show like we always do with a little time out. Today's lighthearted look at divorce and breakups is Robbie Nelson, a stand-up comedian who assures us he's happily married with 2 children, but he has plenty of friends he says who aren't. How you doing today, Robbie?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Our question for you today is, what are the things you shouldn't do during the holidays? And then what are the things maybe you should do to get through them on an even keel?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so I talked to a buddy of mine, and he went through a divorce. He was later in life, and he was explaining to me just how lonely it was. He didn't know where to go. And when he did get invited to places or people wanted to come visit him, he felt squeezed in and lonely. And one of the areas that he really had a hard time with was the pictures, the framed pictures all around the house, just constant reminders of a happier time. So what he did was he took all the pictures down and he replaced them with pictures of the Kardashians. All right, so they were really big back then. He was a big fan. Another thing he did tell me was he had a hard time. He felt like he needed to make new friends. The friends he had, there were a couple friends. It just really wasn't working. So he went out. He bought himself a really nice sports car. It was a Ferrari Spider. Mm-hmm. And so he took this thing around. He drove it down to Laguna Beach and he parked it. And it did not take long before he just had crowds of people swarming around and wanting to be his friend. And some of them were even making propositions. So I guess that's Laguna Beach for you.
Yeah.
Another area you could look at is if you have a joint credit card still with your ex or joint checking account, go on a little shopping spree. Okay, get yourself something nice. All right, you could get one of those electric bikes you've been eyeing, or what I recommend is an Oculus Quest 2. Have you tried one of these?
I have not.
It's virtual reality. It's so much fun. We all have one. We play mini golf. If you're, you can even have someone come over and pretend to be your ex if you're really lonely still. I don't know, whatever you're into, it's possible. It's virtual reality. Anything's possible.
Right.
Another area you want to avoid is drugs and alcohol. I think it's anyone going through this season, lonely, that's just a go-to move, but I don't recommend it. But if you're really jonesing, I recommend going and getting that medical procedure that you've been avoiding, especially if they're done at a surgery center or a hospital. Those ones, they give you an anesthesiologist. This is a doctor. It's his whole job is just to get you high.
Right.
That's it. It's safe. It's legal. It's sanctioned. And even if you do overdose, he's watching it the entire time. You have a team of medical doctors that they're gonna make sure you're fine. And you wake up feeling great. you wake up feeling amazing. So those are my suggestions, what to avoid, what to do to help get yourself through the holiday season, especially after divorce. I hope they help.
Note for our viewers, we don't completely endorse all the suggestions that Robbie's made here today. But thanks, Robbie, for coming in. You've shown us the lighter side of getting divorced and getting through the holidays, and it was very funny.
My pleasure.
Before we go, let's finish up with our sign-off segment, the one that makes you more aware of time and how you spend it. I like doing this with the lyrics of a song. Before I share today's choice, I want you to be aware of the effects music can have on you during the holidays. In recent years, there have been plenty of studies and articles written about the adverse effects of listening to too much holiday music or listening to it too early in the season. A few years ago, Healthline reported that too much of it and listening to it too early could be bad for your mental health. I tend to agree. One alternative is to forego listening to the nostalgic and melancholy song choices and to look for more generic ones that have nothing to do with the holidays. They could even be new songs that just dropped on one of the music streaming platforms. Get super organized. Make a new playlist. That always helps. Doing anything new pushes you forward. Now, back to my lyrics. Here's my choice for closing out the show today as I remind you about the value of time. I've chosen a song written by Glenn Frey and Don Henley, recorded by the Eagles in their blockbuster 1976 Hotel California album. It's called Wasted Time. The lyrics are provocative and wise. They really make you think. For instance, there are phrases in it like, "Sometimes to keep it together, you've got to leave it alone." Yes, obsessing can get you nowhere. Find a positive distraction. Play Happy by Pharrell. And another part of the Eagles song, "And the hours go by like minutes, and the years keep rushing on." The writers are stating that time is fleeting. Yes, be mindful of how much time you're wallowing in your sorrow. Check the sands in your hourglass. And this Eagles song finishes with, "So you can get on with your search, baby, and I can get on with mine. And maybe someday we may find that it wasn't really wasted time." I firmly believe that no experience is coincidental. Maybe this breakup was meant to prepare you for the next phase of your life in a very meaningful way, as hard as it may seem right now. So some of the time that you're spending to get through it should not be thought of as wasted. We do need time to process life's events. I strongly suggest that you talk over with your therapist whether the time you're currently spending is useful to the moving on process or you are merely getting stuck, therefore wasting valuable time you could spend on something else. Like the song says, maybe the time you need to move through this phase of your life may not be wasted after all. You decide. And more than anything, keep the faith and prepare yourself physically and mentally for the holidays. Most of all, vow to take the time to enjoy them. 5-10 years from now, you'll be glad you did.